Good morning, Chicago. Good morning, Illinois. Good morning, teachers, administrators, staff members, and all the wonderful people on the front lines teaching our children and doing the best they can every day. This is Rasha Al-Haj. I will be your moderator for today's webinar entitled E-Learning Tips for Teachers, Intro to Using Zoom, GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, Google, and more, presented by one of my favorite colleagues, Dr. Debra Lynch. Just a reminder that this webinar is part of the weekly series of free webinars offered by Chicago State University, along with free CPDUs for attending. But before we start, I'd like to go over some housekeeping. It is recommended that you view the webinar in full mode and have all other tabs or web pages closed for better viewing quality. I would also like to draw your attention to an important feature. If you look to your right on the control panel, you will see the question tab. Please write down your questions in that space provided. I will be reviewing those questions and sharing them with Dr. Lynch after each platform presentation for about a 5-minute Q&A. Make sure your questions are sent to everyone and not private so I can see them and share them. For now, please ignore the chat function. No need to participate there, as it has been reported to be distracting for participants, especially with a large group like ours this morning. This session will be recorded and shared. You will receive an email from us with your certificate of completion, the PowerPoint presentation, and the link to the recorded webinar. Finally, at the end of the webinar, we ask you to complete an exit survey sharing your evaluation of the webinar and any suggestions you might have for future subjects you would like to see us address. Now, before we start the session, let me introduce to you Dr. Debra Lynch. Debra Lynch taught in urban elementary and high schools for 20 years. She also worked as an assistant director of the Educational Issues Department of the American Federation of Teachers. She was instrumental in the award of a $1.3 million MacArthur grant for an education reform and teacher leadership initiative to the Chicago Teachers Union and served as its president from 2001 till 2004. Dr. Lynch earned a PhD in public policy from the University of Illinois at Chicago and is currently a professor of graduate studies in the College of Education at Chicago State University, where she teaches online in hybrid courses and, of course, face-to-face in educational leadership, curriculum and instruction, and special education. So without further ado, I give the virtual floor to Dr. Lynch.
Okay, thank you, Dr. El-Haj. It is very exciting to be part of this webinar today. And I'd like to start with the point that Dr. El-Haj left off with last week, asking us whether or not we could look at our current situation as either a crisis or an opportunity. The wisdom of the ages tells us that it's not the situation or event itself, but our interpretation of that situation or event that really affects us. So, crisis or opportunity? You all have the knowledge of your students, your content, and how to teach. Our current challenge is to translate that expertise to a new environment, to translate what you already do well in person to this remote environment. A helpful way to think about this that I heard recently is to approach remote learning, e-learning, as if it were the first day of school all over again. It may be helpful to approach this from that vantage point for you and your students, because they are counting on us to get this right, and they need their teachers more than ever now. But you've got this, and we are here to provide support. So let's get started. First, we'd like to get a little bit of an idea of where you and your students are at this moment. So we're going to go to a poll question and ask 3 things of you. So I'm going to launch the first poll, and that is, what percentage of your students have you been able to connect with thus far? So if you would indicate whether it's 0 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, or 75 to 100. We would appreciate it. All righty. Almost everybody has voted here. We'll give it another second or two. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. I see people are still voting. All right, let's take a look and see what we've got here. So let's share the poll here and see our results. So what have we got? Okay, everybody can see where the biggest percentage is the smallest. Okay, so obviously that's another part of our challenge, right? How do we reach out to those students that we have been unable to reach out to? So very, very important. So yeah, it looks like, yeah, 30%, 0 to 25, so fully a third of your students you've been unable to connect with. So on the other hand, what have we got here? Another 50% or more, half the students. So sounds similar to what we've been hearing from our students who are practicing teachers. Okay, I'm going to hide that poll and go to our next question. So the next question for you is, what percentage of your students have access to a device and the internet? So if you would please, what percentage of your students have access to a device or the internet? All right, another couple of seconds to finish up the voting, give everybody a chance to vote. And I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and we'll share the results. All right, let's see what we've got here. So, relatively good news is that 40, 60, 70, 80, okay, about almost 40% have reported 75 to 100% of your students have access to a device and the internet, a device and internet. Okay, and we can see here 50 to 75%, that's about a third, almost a third. And so about another third of our students that have 50% or less. Okay, again, important numbers, concerning numbers, but again, adding to our challenge. And we'll be talking today about some ways that we can reach out to those students who you haven't been able to reach yet, or who have devices but haven't connected with you yet. All right, last question before we jump into our presentation. And this question is, which device do your students use most in remote learning? Is it a cell phone, a tablet, a laptop, or a desktop? Which device do they use the most? Because that also gives us some important information about planning. Okay, I'm going to close the poll in a moment here, and we'll take a look at the results. All right, so we see, half the students are using laptops, okay, and a smaller number, tablet and cell phone, very few on a desktop. Okay, all right, that gives us a little bit of a snapshot of where we're at, and tells us some things about the usefulness of some of the tools that we're going to be talking about today. So again, it gives us a sense of where we're at. Thank you, everybody. Oops, I'm not sure if I shared that, did I? Thank you, everybody, for participating in those polls, and we'll be using that information as we go along. So it gives us a sense of where we're at now, and we're going to move into exploring the 3 online learning platforms that we introduced and advertised. I will be providing a brief overview of 3 pretty exciting tools that will help us organize, engage, simplify, communicate, and build in interactivity into our communication and our lessons with our students. Another thing Dr. El-Haj pointed out in our first webinar was that with the pressure of testing off us at this point, we can really concentrate on some of the important learning goals that we know our students need at this point in time. We can really take advantage of this opportunity to go back and reteach and shore up some of the skills that students need the most help with. And some of these tools that we're going to be talking about today help us customize learning, build in choices, and engage our students in a number of different ways. So we're first going to look at the Google Classroom. And I am going to take us to my Google Classroom. Let me get out of here for a second. There we go. Okay, so you are now looking at my home page for my Google Classroom. And we're going to use Google Classroom as the launching pad for the rest of the webinar. And we are also going to be providing you, as part of our follow-up, the information to be able to access this Google Classroom. You can see the first one on the left is our overall series. So all of the, sorry.
Dr.
Yes.
Lynch, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you need to bring down your the poll. It's still up there.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you, thank you. Oh yeah, hide the poll. Thank you, appreciate that. All right, we good now? Can you see my screen and my Google Classroom?
No, not yet. We still have the home page with your picture on it.
All right, let me get that sharing. Let me go back to sharing.
Share the screen.
Okay, how's that? Here it comes.
Yes,
there
now it's
go.
up. Okay,
thank you.
We're on.
Thank you. All right, appreciate that. So now you should be looking at my home page for the Google Classroom. And the left-hand one is for the whole series. So we are going to be placing all of our recordings, all of our resources for all 9 of our webinar series in this Google Classroom. And you may ask, where do you find Google Classroom? So this is assuming that your school district, and from our poll last week, we know that the very vast majority of you are with CPS. But if your school district has Google Classroom, you would find it in your email or on any of your Google pages. It is in the upper right-hand corner, that little 9-dot launching pad. And when you hit that launching pad, you will see a drop down and you will see all of the features in your Google Classroom. So today we're going to be looking at, in your Google account. Today we're going to be looking at Google Classroom, which you can see here. We're going to be looking also at Google Meet, which is a little further down. And finally, we're just going to get a little mention of a Google tool called Jamboard, which can function as a whiteboard when you go into Google Meet. So that's where you can find Google Classroom. And we're going to jump in time. So Google Classroom allows a teacher to create a class for each and every section or class that you have to offer. So I've named my class here, E-Learning Tips for Teachers, the name of our webinar. And we're going to go from left to right and kind of talk about these features and then do a little dive into Google Meet as an important web conferencing tool. So Google Classroom is certainly a one-stop shop for classroom teaching. If you and your students were using it prior to going to remote learning, then they have a jump start on understanding how to access information in your class, right? If not, you may need to spend some more time upfront teaching them how to access this information. If not, helping them learn what the Google Classroom is all about and how to navigate it. So let's take a walk through the Google Classroom, and we're going to go from left to right. So the first link that you can see in the middle of the page is your Google Stream, and this is kind of like your feed in your Facebook page. It will have a little welcome, and it will indicate all of the things that you have integrated into your Google Classroom, just your Facebook feed, with the last entry listed first. So that just is a little bit of a preview and an overview of your class. Of your class is Classwork. And you now are looking at the Classwork link. And what you can see in the top left-hand corner are all the topics that I've included in my class. And this is a really important section for you to think about how you can most helpfully organize the information you want your students to have access to. Do you want to create topics by the days of the week? Do you want to create your topics by the title of your units, by the title of the chapters that you're reading? But thinking about, once you have already had a lesson and walked your students through the Google Classroom environment, thinking about how you want to organize your class. And you can see I've organized my class today under the following topics: the introductory materials and resources, using Google Classroom, using Zoom, and GoToMeeting. And as Dr. El-Haj said, we're going to have a little presentation on each one, followed by a 5-minute Q&A, and then we'll go on to the next. So you can see that I've organized my class in 4 chunks, and this would be something that you would need to do as well. How are you going to organize your information to make it easily accessible? But what's very cool is all of the other resources that go with this Classwork section. So let me talk about these buttons right below the top here. We've got the click to create. You can, in this button, very easily add an assignment, a quiz, add some material, add a link, add a Google Meet event. And so we're going to come back to that in a moment, but it very easily enables you to add all this important information to enhance the information, the material that you want to teach your kids. Across the top here, we have Google Meet, which is the video conferencing app, which we're going to dip into in a few minutes. What's also very exciting about Google Classroom is Google Calendar is built right in. So when you do create an assignment and you attach a date to it, that assignment shows up on the Google Calendar. And so your students have yet another way to organize and access the information that you want them to access, the assignments that you want them to do. And finally, across the top is the Google Drive class folder. And here's where, for each of your classes, you can put all of the information that you plan on using for a given course and have it just totally at your fingertips when you want to incorporate it or upload it to the next topic or section for your class. So let's jump back here to the Create button for a moment. You can see those options here. And let me show you how it is to create an assignment in Google Classworks. You indicate the title of the class, obviously here, and write your instructions for your students. And just as you would in an email, you've got this little drop-down button that enables you to upload a file, a link, a YouTube video, and anything from your Google Drive. So if you have put all of your files together for this particular course in your Google Drive, you can hit Google Drive, access it in your Google Drive, and upload that material right there. So moving over to the right-hand side of the page, this side allows you to determine which class you want to put your material in, which group of students it should go to. You allocate the point system that you want for the class. And if you put a due date on here, you then have a date and a visual representation of that assignment in the Google Calendar. This also lets you add determine which topic, which unit, which day of the week. Again, thinking about how you want to simplify and organize access to the content is so important, and that would determine then which topic you put that assignment in. It also enables you to attach a rubric and even an option for originality reports if you are concerned about or want to focus on issues of plagiarism. So, and you can see in my introductory materials, I've uploaded a bunch of cool stuff. So you'll be free to look at those later when you get the code for coming into my Google Classroom. But just want to show you a couple of things that just perusing the free materials that are available for teachers. Let's take a quick look at the Epic books. This takes us right to a link that shows us that there is because pandemic opportunity for teachers to have access to 40,000 ebooks, learning videos, quizzes, and more. And you can see they're all organized by age. And so ebooks can be a very cool way of incorporating into your web conferencing. You can show an ebook on your screen, which I'll show you in a minute, and take your kids through a lesson and have the material right there. They can view it on their phone, on their tablet, on their laptops, and so very, very exciting. So just put some resources in there for you to take a look at. PBS has some great teaching tools and videos, actually, of some of those teaching tools. I included a CPS digital resources information as well off of the CPS website. There are about 8 pages of resources and links to free things, cool things, book things, all kinds of resources organized by age and subject area. But let us take a look at how we can use Google Meet to add video conferencing to our lessons. So a couple of things under this using Google Classroom and Google Meet tab shows you, for example, how you can actually create assignments in the Google Slides app that students can actually fill in right on the screen and save for you right there. So you can capture their work, you've got it right there to be graded. So there's a whole bunch of resources here for getting started, but I wanted to show you how you can use and incorporate Google how you can incorporate Google Meet. There. Okay, so I have put this in as an assignment, and I have created a Google Class meeting. And I'll show you how you can do that. But this kind of shows you how, again, you can incorporate a video chat with your students that can be recorded. So that's the other really important thing about some of these features, that you can record the videos of your presentations and you can save them to a website, you can send them to your students in an email, you can even text them to your students on their phones, and they can view video of your lessons at a later date, because as you all showed us, you're not able to reach all of them currently, and I'm sure not all at the same time synchronously either. So let's take a quick view into Meet and get a little bit of a sense of this very important web conferencing tool that, again, is totally integrated into the Google Classroom. So we come up here with our screen. This is what you see when you end up. And it gives us the Join Now opportunity. So when you are going to incorporate a Google Meet episode in your class, you open one up and you scoop up the link, and this is how you embed it right there in your classwork. So you highlight the link, save it, and then when you go back to your assignment, you can do that drop down and embed the link and direct your students to the event, the date and time, and then later again, you can upload the recording of the Google Meet session as well for later viewing. All right, we're going to look at our toolbar at the bottom of the screen. Again, you can see here, we're going to go left to right. You can see the pop-up screen here that gives us this information, and also you attachments to your Google Meet event. So say you want the students to have a particular reading, a handout, you can put it right there for them. Along the bottom, you can microphone, obviously turn your webcam on and off. But here's a very cool feature in Google Meet, is turning on the captions. So this might be an additional way for your visual learners to be able to see as well as hear your presentation. You can turn that feature on and off, and it, as you can see, captures the presentation, the conversation. Move on to the next button and we've got our Present Now. So this allows you to click on a window, which I'm going to do. It takes you to the share setting. So I'm going to click on sharing windows. You need to have your tabs open and ready for sharing. So in this case, it took me straight to a PowerPoint presentation, and you would be able to go through your presentation. You'd hit present, obviously, and you're presenting to everyone. There are some workarounds in Google Meet. You're not able to actually see your students at the same time, which is one of the features of some of the other platforms that we're going to be talking about, but there are some workarounds for that. And so you can check those out on YouTube. Some teachers have found some creative ways of doing that. So I'm going to hit stop sharing. But again, it kind of shows us that that sharing icon you straight to whatever material you have in a tab on your computer. And one of those can be that Jamboard feature that I mentioned in the Google drop-down menu. Jamboard is Google's Whiteboard. So if you have that open as a tab on your screen, you can go right to the whiteboard, and all of the tools for annotating, for highlighting, for brainstorming students' comments are right there. And last but not least, we've got this pop-up tab that takes us to the tools that enable us to do things like record the meeting. So again, really important if you're thinking about a variety of ways of reaching and teaching your students to record your meeting, that again, you have that link and you are able to share that later in every possible way that you can to reach out to those students. This tab also takes you to being able to go full screen, your settings, reported problem, and so on. All right, so that's our little preview of Google Meets and how you might show a slide in Google Meets. Let's take us back to our home page. So we've got some other features here. I've got some videos that I've included as well, how to use Google Classroom, getting started Google. There's one here on incorporating Google Meets into your lessons. And of course, the one on creating assignments that students can write on in the document, save on their Google Classroom, and you are then enabled to go to the grading page and find that assignment and grade. One final point about Google Classroom, and that is this video I have here. There is a 4th grade teacher who is the technology advisor in her school as well, and she's got a website called Pocket Full of Primary, and she's got an array of very cool YouTube videos that you may find useful in getting started with using Google Meets and Google Classroom and Google Slides. So we've got the people link up here that can show you the students in your class, and we've got a few students already in here. There's also a tool in Google Classroom that allows you to invite guardians into your Google Classroom, and in doing so, the parents then give you their email and they can also be informed about their students' progress. And finally, your grades page. Any of the assignments that you had put in there, you can go right into them and grade from here. So I'm going to stop at this point on Google Classroom and Google Meet and see if we have any questions. Dr. El-Haj?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lynch. So we have a few questions that came up. Someone asked if you could edit the recording in case you have an interruption and you want to take out that interruption.
That is a great question, and I am not positive about that. You can certainly pause the recording while you are playing it. So to be honest, I'm not sure about video editing tools. You might need some very complex video editing tools. So best case scenario is to have all your materials tabbed and ready to go, and pause if you are experiencing anything like your timer going off. So I'm not exactly sure about it, but I think that that might require some video editing tools that you may or may not have.
Okay, we have another question about the Google Meet function within Google Classroom. They're asking if students can access a video call anytime they want, even if the teacher isn't there, or does it have to be a scheduled meeting?
It does have to be a scheduled meeting, and your best bet is to embed the Google Meet link into the assignment or as an assignment in your classwork page. But there are controls that enable you to to not start the meeting, to not have the meeting started until the host is there. So that is a really good question because you don't want students inside a video conferencing without you. So there are definitely controls that you can do that, and the student will not be able to access the Google Meet event until you, as the host, have turned it on.
Okay, and another question was about the Google extension that acted like a whiteboard. I know you went over it, and so if you can just remind them.
Yes, absolutely. Again, if you click your little launch pad on the Google top right-hand corner of Google, which I'm doing right now, and you scroll down, the whiteboard in Google Classroom is called Jamboard. So if you click that, it opens up your screen and you can begin to, you can see I was playing around with it. It opens up a whiteboard for you. Bottom right-hand corner enables you to create one. And when you do that, it went up a slate, if you will. We'll see tools for annotation in a minute. So yep, here they are. So you've got the pen function, you've got the array function, you've got pointer, and you've got a way to add a sticky note to your presentation. You can incorporate images, and it is a very useful tool. So when you open Google Meet and go to your tabs, you can just click on the Jamboard tab, and it takes you right to that whiteboard, and you can go ahead and right away.
All right, thank you. We have time for one more question, quick question. Somebody's asking, how do the students receive an invite once you set up a meeting? And that would be our last question for this Q&A.
Okay, very good. And again, in Google, it does allow you to send an invitation. So that's one way. You can actually send them by email with the link. If you are embedding the Google Meet event into an activity, you have it listed actually as one of your assignments. So again, you could create an assignment, you hit here, and you can put Google Meet today at 2 p.m. And then you scroll down here, you let the students know, please join today at 2 p.m. Have your paper ready, your notebook, your textbook, your novel. You hit link, you embed the link to your Google Meets event right here. You add the link, and then it shows up as an assignment on their calendar, and then they can access it right there. I didn't show the, oh, I did show the Google Calendar. So yeah, it would show up on their Google Calendar. So when they open their calendar to see what the events are or what the activities or assignments are for a given day, it's right there. They can click on it and get the link that way as well. But again, if it isn't 2 p.m., it will not open, and it will not open until you as host open it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lynch. I think we're ready to move on to the next platform.
Okay, let's take a look at Zoom. All right, Zoom is a very cool platform. And we've got a couple of resources here. Zoom for Education, using Zoom in elementary school, tips and tricks for using Zoom, and managing groups. So I'm going to take you to a Zoom lesson, or a Zoom very mini lesson. So I already scheduled my Zoom e-learning webinar session. So, and those are really easy to do. Zoom offers, again, in the pandemic, Zoom and GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar are offering free access for educators. So these are really great tools, and they're free and available to us. So I'm going to hit start, get us into our e-learning webinar example. And once again, we are in my screen. And in order to look at this platform, again, we're going to go from the bottom of the screen left to right. So you've got your microphone button here, and you click that and make sure that you know the correct microphone is being used. You can check your speaker and microphone, and that's always really important to do ahead of time. Do that speaker and mic check. And just check your settings. In video, again, the same thing. You can check to make sure that your webcam is working. Check those settings. Moving along, according to the bottom of the tray, we've got security. Another good feature for working with students. You can enable the waiting room. So here's another to anticipate a question about access. If you enable the waiting room, then your students will not be able to join your session until you as the host begin it. You can allow participants to share screen. Usually not recommended because you are not sure, oftentimes not sure whether or not you want your students to share their screens. But you certainly want to enable chat. You probably do not want your students to rename themselves either. So those are a few things that you can do to improve security in your Zoom session. We're next going to look at Manage Participants, and this icon, this tab, opens up that list of participants, and you can see the students coming and going, and you can also mute them, unmute them, see if they've got their webcam on, and down at the very bottom of this tab, you can see there is also another way to invite students. So you can invite students in your contacts or send an email, and you can mute and unmute folks, and also allow people to unmute themselves. You can check off the various things that you might want to have going on in your class. Again, probably don't want the participants to rename themselves, but being able to unmute themselves so they can participate will be important. Polling is another great feature in Zoom, just as we did with our poll in GoToWebinar. This is something important that you would do ahead of time. You would plan on the questions that you are interested in asking your students, and it's a great way to build in interactivity during a lesson, right? When you can pause, you can, chunk your material, as we're doing as well, so that you've got short bursts of material and then an opportunity for the students to interact. So this link takes you to a little page that allows you to type in your questions, indicate whether you want it to be single answer or multiple choice, and build in those multiple choice options. So it's an excellent way to build in interactivity in a Zoom meeting. Next up is our chat box, and this is a really important feature, right? We want interaction. We want our students to be thinking and demonstrating their understanding and responding to questions. So even if you don't have the polling function, say in Google Meets, the chat box is another way that you can build in the interactivity. And what I like about Zoom is that you can keep it on while you're presenting, so that you can keep an eye on what is happening in the chat box, the contributions students are making, and so on. So the chat box function enables you, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a file button here that takes you to all your files. You can upload a file, say during the discussion, something comes up and you're like, oh yeah, I want to give you that, that graphic organizer to go with this lesson. And you can find it and upload it right here. So I'll show you how easy it is to do that. Let me go to my desktop, find a little activity here that we can put in the chat box to show how easy it is. So second grade, ants and grasshopper, and there it is. The link is right there, so anybody in the video conference can scoop that up, can click it and open it on their screen, can copy it and save it for later. Another cool feature in the chat box is that there's a save chat function. So you can save the chat, or the students can save the chat and keep at the end of the video, it gives you a file that is a running record of the interaction and conversation. And you can indicate who the participants can chat with. You probably want everybody publicly to prevent the students from privately emailing each or messaging each other and getting a little distracted. All right, I'm going to skip share screen for a moment just to hit on a couple of other things, and then I'm going to share the share screen and how that can be used as well. Record button, really important. Again, since we're not all, synchronously working with our students, so recording your session. Again, the conference concludes, a link pops up, save that link, embed it in your course web page, whatever platform or whatever course structure that you're using to share information, or embed it in an email. So a recording is important. Google also has a Breakout Rooms feature. Again, maybe not one you want to use with younger students, but if you have an IEP meeting or a staff meeting and you want to break out into small groups, this feature allows you to take 20 people, break them into groups of 4, and you can set the time for how long you want them to be in the breakout room, and allow people to move back and forth, come back to the main room, and even set a timer to let people know that the time is coming to a close. And then each group can report out. So that's another way of building in participation. And over here, you can see there's a couple of little reactions. There's also a raised hand feature in Zoom as well in the participants box. So at the bottom of the participants box, you see a number of different raised hand features when you are in the participants view. You can't see them on mine, but when a student does exercise the raised hand feature, that hand shows up next to their name. And finally, one more example of using the share tool and how you can do a number of different things with it. So I'm going to hit this particular screen because I have a library book open. So I mentioned that Epic Books for Teachers, our libraries have all kinds of ebooks. And so I just put up Diary of a Wimpy Kid as an example of a way that you can teach and share and read to your kids, model good reading strategies. There is a toolbar, there is a toolbar here as well that you can access. There it is. So I mentioned you want to keep your chat box open, so I'm going to open chat and put that over there so I can keep an eye on my students. And manage participants, I usually like to leave that open as well so I can see if anybody's coming and going. But here's the annotation bar. So say I want to highlight, who is the author, right? You can annotate, you can highlight, you can draw text. Another cool thing to do is with the text box over here on the side. Let me move that over a second. Yeah. So you can use this as an opportunity as you're asking your kids. Let's take a look at the title of this story. What do you predict is gonna, this book is gonna be about? And then you can ask your students. Predictions might be helpful if I spelled it correctly. And you can ask your students to make comments, and you can, again, use this annotation tool to have them unmute themselves and share out their predictions, or to write their predictions in the chat box, and you can copy them down. And so a variety of different ways that you can use the share tool. And this obviously is, you can share in both Meets, Zoom, and GoToMeeting, and a really good feature. And they all allow you to record as well. Okay, I'm going to get out of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, stop sharing here, and let's see how we're doing here. Okay, have we covered everything in our Zoom conferencing platform? All right, I'm going to hit end meeting for all, and you will get, again, as I said, a link that will take you to your recording link as well. Okay, I'm going to pause here and see if we have any questions about Zoom. Dr. El-Haj?
Yes, we have a few questions. One of them is, one of the participant is asking, can you record and present later?
Absolutely, yep, that record button is there in the bottom tray. you hit that record button, and you will get that a link to the recording as soon as the meeting is over. Absolutely. And it's so important to be able to do that so that you can share it again in many different, as many different ways as you can to communicate to your students.
Okay. Another question was about the maximum number of students that we can group in the breakout function.
Okay. Well, the free Zoom has a limitation, I believe, of 25 students. So there is a Zoom Pro that does allow you to have bigger groups. So I don't recall the maximum number of groups that you can break out into, but in the free Zoom, you know, assuming if you have 25 in the group, you can certainly break them up into, you know, 3, 4, 6, or 7 groups.
Okay, and then we'll take one more questions so that we don't run out of time. A few were asking about if they could see all their students at the same time while sharing screen. Some were saying they could only see 4 at a time, and then they would have to scroll to see more.
There are features also that will enable you to determine whether or not you want to see the whole gallery of participants that are on a webcam at the same time, or whether you just want to see the speaker. I didn't highlight that when we were in the session, but there is certainly that feature to do that you can click. It's at the top of the screen, and you can indicate whether you want to see the whole gallery of participants or just the presenter, or whether you just want to be notified of who is speaking. So the manage participants box is also something that you can have open, and you can see if there's somebody that's raising their hand or somebody that has left the classroom as well.
Okay, we'll take the last question. I think that's an important one. Do students need to download Zoom? How do they connect to Zoom? That's our last question.
Yes, that's a really important question. You're right. Right, to use Zoom, you would need to download the app. So it's easily available on tablets and desktops. And when you get a link to a Zoom meeting, an invitation to a Zoom meeting, it will prompt you to do that. And again, Zoom is free for educators now, and easily available. And how to access it and other tips and tricks are in the material that I've attached to my using Zoom topic today. Okay, shall we go on to our last example?
Yes.
Okay, so finally we've got here using GoToMeetings and GoToWebinar. So a couple of things here. GoToMeeting also is free, and GoToWebinar as well. So I've got a link here to a free subscription and a couple of other examples. There's a video, GoToMeeting for School, which shows a teacher and how he uses GoToMeeting in his classrooms. So some resources there. What we're going to start with is a fit image of a Zoom interface. Because we are already on GoToWebinar, I'm not able to launch GoToMeeting from my screen or from my computer. But what I'm doing here is showing you what it would look like if you were in a GoToMeeting web conference. So, and here's where I can also answer that previous question about how you can adjust seeing the webcams and seeing the participants, because it's very similar in Zoom and in GoToMeeting. So you enter GoToMeeting again with a link. So oftentimes it's sent via email. Again, you can put that email in your lesson plans, depending on how you are sending your lesson plans to your students, or whether or not you've got some kind of a website, a classroom website. You can send the link to any of these web conferencing experiences via email, via text, embedded in a website. And so once you click on the link, it takes you into the GoToMeeting environment, which you're looking at right here. And so in GoToMeeting, what we've got, and this is just a picture of one. What you see here are 3 people in this particular meeting. And we're going to start by looking across the top here in this GoToMeeting session. So in the middle of the top, you can see that little drop-down menu that invites you to say, I want to see everyone, I want to not see the webcams, or I just want to see the presenter's webcam. So that's a good feature to enable you to control how you want to access the information. You'll have your participants list that you can click on and see your participants. You can see again if they're accessing the situation, the conference by webcam, and so on. You can mute and unmute, and you can also, as you can see at the bottom, you can copy the meeting link and send it and invite people as well. So if you set this up ahead of time, this is where you get that information to send out the links to your students or to your participants. So again, looking at across the top, you can see left to right. If you choose, select the person who is speaking, whoever is talking, their name shows up here. The middle, you've got that selection of how you want to view screens. And as we can see here, these three individuals do not have their webcams on, nor do they have, nor have they uploaded a picture of themselves. So we're seeing their initials here, and that's just fine. Moving right along in GoToMeeting, you can also see the drop down for your participants. Again, you can open and close that, but it's a good way to keep an eye on things. The chat box is really the key for that interaction. So GoToMeeting does not have a polling function, so you would need, if you were using this platform, to use the chat box for that. And the chat box is a terrific way to, again, present some material, stop, ask questions, get some feedback, get some brainstorming going. And you've got settings here. This platform also allows you to share your screen. So you can see over here on the side, there's the control panel that enables you to see what your audience is seeing. And that's an important feature. You can also, again, turn your webcam on or off, mute yourself, share screen, and again, access all of those important features in GoToMeeting. Bottom left-hand corner, just before we leave, is that record button. So recording is a feature of all three of these web conferencing platforms that we're talking about today, and a very important one. So let's take a quick look at GoToWebinar. And here we go. Take a look at this slide here. I'm going to open up this present slide. And this is the image for the GoToWeb platform that we're using today. Again, GoToMeeting is meant to be much more interactive. Again, you can share your screen in GoToMeeting, you can do polling, and it's meant and designed for more a small group kind of interaction. Whereas GoToWebinar, what you see here is the control panel, and you can see a number of features that we have available to us. And GoToWebinar is also a free option for educators, and it allows you to, again, turn your mic on and off, control your dashboard. You can invite other people to present. You can share your presentation screen so that you've got multiple people who may be sharing, taking turns, going back and forth. Always important to check the audio so that you, and there's an audio check built in here as well. So that would be, an important best practice, right, for presenting in the web conferencing, to make sure that the audio is functioning properly. Questions, we've used questions today, and we've used polls today. So 2 ways of building interactivity. You can also attach handouts for a webinar, and you can also enable the chat function as well. So we're going to exit that image of GoToWebinar and stop and take your questions. So any questions about GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar, Dr. Elhaj?
Yes, we have a few people asking about the advantages of the three different platforms, and does one have an advantage over the other? And in your opinion, which one would you recommend for K-2 students? And some people were asking about the non-readers, like the younger children. So, according to your opinion, which one would you recommend for K-2? And then, which one has an advantage over the other?
Okay, double question there, and really two good questions. And it depends on a couple of things. One is your access, right? If your school district has Google Classrooms, you've got the advantage of all that interactivity, the calendar and the Google Meets and the ability to enter grades and so on. So one is the availability of these resources, although again, some are free. So overall, the one that has the most features, I think, would be Zoom. You can record, there's a raised hand feature, there's a poll feature, you can share your screen, there's a whiteboard built in, you can view your kids at the same time. So on the one hand, it is your availability of resources. On the other, I think more than the platform itself is your knowledge of your students and your content, because they all pretty much allow you to share screens, to record, to build in some interaction. That share screen function is available in all of these, and that really is where you can do your recording. So for young kids, if you're doing a read aloud, if you're modeling reading aloud, if you're modeling reading strategies, if you're planning on recording videos so that parents can show the video to the students later, any one of these would be good. So it really boils down to your expertise, your knowledge of your students, but they all have some really good functions. In looking at GoToMeeting, it does not have the whiteboard function, but when you share your screen, again, you can have a whiteboard loaded just as you could with Google Meets. So it's not necessarily the platform as much as practice, becoming familiar. So what you have available, becoming familiar with the features. Today was just that brief little overview of each of the features. And again, your knowledge of the developmental levels and the maturity level of your students. So any of these platforms enable you to organize material, enable you to build in some interaction, even if it is just the chat box, but the chat box plus the polling, plus surveys, plus brainstorming on the whiteboard are all ways to engage. The Google Classroom obviously allows you to really organize everything in one place, that one-stop shop. And so that, if you have that available, any limitations to Google Meets can be worked around with some of the other features that Google has. It doesn't have, Google Meets, for example, doesn't have a polling function, but you can actually create polls using Google Docs. So, so again, it's the availability to you. It's your opportunity to practice. So that's why I've identified resources for every one of the three. If you are at a point where you're just beginning to think about using any of these platforms, taking a look at what materials are here, which one goes best with your style, your approach, and seeing how other teachers are using them can spur your creativity to run with it.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Lynch. We're going to stop the questions here. because we're running out of time and we would like to be punctual. Great presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Do not leave yet. I had a lot of questions about, the PowerPoint presentation. The session was recorded, as we had mentioned earlier in the introduction. You will receive an email from us with your certificate of completion, the PowerPoint presentation, and the link to the recorded webinar. So you will be able to review all this wonderful information that Dr. Lynch presented during your own time. As soon as you leave the webinar, I would like to ask you to please complete the exit survey. It will pop up on your screen. So please take a couple minutes to complete it. Your feedback is really, really important to us. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Tune in for another wonderful webinar next Thursday at 8:30. We can't wait to share all this information with you, and have a great and wonderful day.